Hey, it's Twana with Biblical Understanding of American Politics. Today, we're going to talk about the effects of Project 2025 on women. It just happened to be there's this gentleman I watch. His name is Reese Waters, and he did this video in which he broke down that the FBI, of course, has always had records of hate groups and any form of terrorist group, right? And so there's 170 white supremacy groups out there. And I want you to understand something about white supremacy. While their focus has always been on people of color, Latino, Black, Asian, all of those groups, it also has always been against women and white women specifically. Whether it's the oppression of you as a female or the tearing down of you as a female, the constant reminder that as a woman, you're nothing better than being barefoot and pregnant. And so today, I wanted to bring something to your memory because oftentimes when we forget what our history is, we are doomed to repeat it. And so I wanted to play a video for you today.
Now you have heard of women's rights and how we've tried to reach new heights. If we're all created equal, that's us too. Yeah, but you will probably not recall that it's not been too long at all since we even had the right to cast a vote. Well, sure, some men bow down and call dismissal. Yeah. Let us hang the wash out and wash the dishes. But when the time rolled around to elect a president, what did they say, sister?
What did they say?
They said, see you later, alligator. And don't forget my mashed potatoes, cause I'm going downtown to cast my vote for president. Oh, we were suffering until suffering. Not a woman here could vote no matter what age. And the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. And now we pull down on the lever, cast our ballot, and we endeavor to improve our country, state, county, town, and school.
Tell them about
those pilgrim women who braved the foe.
They could
cook the turkey, but they could not vote. Even Betsy Ross, who showed the flag, was left behind that first election day.
what a shame, sisters.
Then Susan B., Anthony,
Yeah,
and Julia Howe, Lucretia Mott,
and others.
they showed us how they carried signs and marched in lines until at long last the law was passed. Oh, we were suffering until suffrage. Not a woman here could vote no matter what age. Then the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule.
Oh, yeah.
And now we pull down on the lever, cast our ballot, and we endeavor to improve our country, state, county, town, and school. Yeah. Yes, the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. Yes, the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. Yeah. All right. We got it now. Since 1920, Sisters Unite.
So let me remind you of how long women have actually had rights in the United States of America. So in 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, granting American women the right to vote. Now, if you look at 1920, you go, oh, well, that was 104 years ago. Okay, you are correct. But it wasn't until 1930 to 1940, when World War II was going on, that women got to go into the actual workforce. Before that, you could vote, but you still weren't allowed to work. When white males went off to war in Nazi Germany, that was when women had to stand up and start doing jobs that were normally held for them. A lot of them had to do with making uniforms, doing things of that nature. It wasn't until 1963, 33 years later, the Equal Pay Act was signed into law, aiming to abolish wage disparity based on gender. That wasn't that long ago. So 61 years ago, women just started getting equal pay, or at least closer to male pay. And so in the workforce, white males make the most, white females make the second most. So prior to 1963, that wasn't available to you. 1964 is the most important point that we need to discuss, because 1964 was when the Civil Rights Act was signed into law. Now, everybody always talks about the Civil Rights Act because it gave rights to people of color. What they don't often talk about is that the Civil Rights Law actually gave rights to women, and especially white women. As women, you benefited more from the Civil Rights Act than anyone else. It was the opportunity for you to go and do whatever you wanted to do at that point, except you couldn't have credit and you couldn't take out loans in your name. So that was 60 years ago. You see, most of what has happened for women, most of what's come about and given you the power to be successful is not over 100 years old. Voting is over 100 years old. When women were first allowed to enter the workforce is about 100 years old. But the rest of it, it was recent. And that's the hardest thing for many people to understand, is that it's only been less than one lifetime before you had rights that you have today. You didn't walk into a pharmacy and see women. Everywhere you went, it was men. So in 1964, you were finally able to not be discriminated against because you were a female. In 1974, 10 years later, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act made it illegal to discriminate against credit applicants based on gender, marital status, race, religion, or age. This allowed women to obtain credit cards and loans without male cosigners. You see, prior to 1974, if you didn't have a husband, you weren't getting approval for anything. If he didn't sign as the one who was going to pay it back, you wouldn't have the opportunity to start your own business. You wouldn't have the opportunity to do many of the things that you do today. You wouldn't own your own houses. You see, one of the things that we didn't pull up was when women were allowed to buy houses and to actually own those houses in their names. If your father passed away or your husband passed away, you lost his property because you weren't allowed to own property. So if you're looking at the conservative ticket, the thing I want you to understand is this. While they are trying to roll back the clock to a previous time that was truly not as great as people like to think it was, I want you to understand what you're losing. Your daughter has less rights now than what you've had. They're not making that up. That's not hyperbole. You see, it's really easy during this time of chaos to call things hyperbole when you don't want people to look deeper into it. And so what Project 2025 and its creators are looking at is the fact that they don't want you to look into it. Here's what they know. They know that you will listen to Donald Trump. They know that you will have bias against Kamala Harris because of a number of reasons. One, she's Black. And there has always been this perpetuation of animosity between Black and white women. That comes from a very long history that people often forget. And that history is not well documented. In fact, there is no research to explain what the animosity comes from. And it's very frustrating. I want you to understand that as long as they can put animosity between you and Kamala Harris, you will vote what is comfortable. And what is comfortable is the look of a male in the White House. That can't be how you make your decision, because the male that you're looking at is the figurehead for Project 2025. Yes, Donald Trump has disavowed Project 2025? Of course he has. Because if he doesn't tell you it's extreme, he runs the risk of losing your vote. Understand this. People are not always honest. And when you understand that people aren't always honest, here's the other thing that you get. Sometimes they're going to say things that make them look better. But you can't have it both ways. You can't support it in 1 minute and disavow it in the next. So the thing that you want to look at is, do I support democracy or don't I? You see, that's the thing that everybody keeps trying to make an issue now. It's Republican versus Democrat. When I was listening to Reese Waters, a video he showed put it in the best way I've ever heard it. Supporting Donald Trump is 170 white supremacy group. White supremacists who don't like people of color or white women. As a matter of fact, I know and experience more Caucasian males who don't respect the women in their lives than do. And those are the men that come into my sphere. I want you to understand that. Because what that does to you as a Caucasian female is that it frustrates you and it makes your life far more challenging than it needs to be. Because there's nothing worse than going to a man who's supposed to be your husband, your partner in life, and what you say has minimal value to him. It's disrespectful and it undercuts the foundation of your relationship. I get that. But you've got to be willing to make sure that he gets that. 1974, 50 years ago, was when you got the right to have your own credit without the co-signing of a male. And in 1978, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act was passed, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. You see, prior to 1978, if you got pregnant, they had the right to fire you. The question is that really what you want to go back to? You see, there are some of you who really enjoy working. Some of you who actually love your jobs. You don't have the desire to quit. You have dreams, you have goals, you have things that you want to do. And living off of your husband's salary is not your idea of a good time. Living off of your father's salary is not your idea of a good time. So then the question becomes, what would make you choose to put yourself in that position? What is it about what Donald Trump is saying that has you on the fence? You see, many of you will say, I don't know her policies. I don't know anything about her. That's not a valid statement. It's not a valid argument because she has stated her policies many times. It's an excuse. And you have to evaluate for yourself why that's an excuse. And when you do that, what you can eventually begin to understand is where you are truly at and what you are truly struggling with. You see, we're in the countdown to the election day. Voter suppression is happening. And it's funny because people often think, again, voter suppression is about people of color. And while it is, it often and still includes you as a white woman. Because as long as they can shut your vote down, you don't have the opportunity to potentially vote for Kamala Harris. Understand that. They're trying to silence you as much as they are people who look like me. Is that really where you want to go? Is that the world that you want to go back to? Because that's what they're talking about. And according to Project 2025, here's the next thing. You could, under this new administrative rule, walk into your job one day on a Monday, as an example, after having the greatest weekend of your life, and your boss walks in and says, by the way, pack up your things. You're fired. Or you could come and find your things packed up already for you, waiting for you at the front desk. And you have no job. You will have no recourse. There's nothing you can do because now the protections that allow you to work for that company to make the money that you're doing, they don't exist anymore. And not every company is reputable. Not every company will choose to do the right thing. So ask yourself, do I really want to go back? Or am I someone who says we won't go back? Do you love democracy and the freedom that you have to go and work, despite all of its flaws, despite its problems? Or do you want to destroy that for you and everyone around you? Do you want a world where your daughters have less rights than what you grew up with? Because understand this, unlike the first time, there will be no undoing what these people are proposing and working to put into place every day behind the scenes. it will be a world that you are stuck in forever. See you next week.